Welcome to Mythbusters, our new master B2B format, where we take a key executive, an experienced person in e-commerce, and put them on the hot seat. My name is Brian Breck, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by Andy Hoar, my partner at Master B2B. And we're thrilled today to bring this new format to you. Andy, for those of you who don't know him, is a longtime industry expert, sought after by boards and C-suites all over the world on topics of digital transformation, e-commerce, 7 years running the B2B e-commerce practice at Forrester and the CEO of Paradigm B2B. Andy, welcome. And I'm so excited about this new format we have today.
Yeah, cool format. And as usual, Brian, you are too kind in your introduction. So let me return the favor. So for those who don't know who Brian is at this point, Brian's a 20-year industry veteran, was a practitioner for, 17 of those years, 15, 17 of those years. And is now an author of a book called $1 Billion B2B Ecommerce. He's an industry consultant and also a highly sought after speaker in the space. And it's great to join up with you in this new format called Mythbusters.
Yeah, and thanks for that intro. And we've been thinking about doing this for a while now. And what we really want to do is determine whether some of the key issues in B2B e-commerce are in fact true, or are they myths that need to be busted. So we're going to tackle that today. And our topic today is Shopify, which is a really interesting topic. We'll get to that in just a moment. This is about the audience, as all of our sessions are. We want you, the practitioners, the folks in the audience today, to submit questions. So in the Q&A box here, just go ahead and submit your questions. We got a bunch of questions in advance that will cover some of those. And of course, Andy and I have some questions today too. Now, this is a hot topic, right? So we asked this question, is Shopify a legitimate contender in B2B e-commerce? Is that true, or is that a myth? And, this is a hot topic, Andy. We have folks like Samar from 3M is on today. We've got Kendall Electric here, Baron Lighting. Just looking at some of the other folks logging in. We got Shimano here, and for any bicycle enthusiasts out there. We've got Reinders here, a major distributor out of the Midwest, Green Shields Industrial Supply. Companies are trying to answer this question, we want you to submit your questions too. So, personally, I think Shopify should be in every B2B conversation. We're going to put somebody on the hot seat today and ask them why that's not true. So that said, Andy, we want to go ahead and get into our session. Who do we have on the hot seat today, Andy? Who do we have? Wow, I wouldn't want to be on that seat. Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, so we have fun with these things, and so we thought we'd show a hot seat with a burning chair. And so today's guest is Rick Wilson from Miva. We hope he brought his neoprene suit so he could survive the hot seat there. So welcome, Rick.
Thanks, Andy. Happy to be here as always. Well, I guess never been here before, but happy to talk to you as always.
That's right. So for those who don't know Rick Wilson, so Rick is the CEO of Miva, which is an enterprise and mid-market vendor in the B2B e-commerce space. Rick has been with Miva since 1999, back in the way back machine. That was the days when we had this thing called the internet that people were just trying to figure out. And so Rick actually has been with the company since then, and he liked the company so much, as the commercial we somewhat remember from the 1990s, that he decided to buy the company. So in 2007, was it?
Yep.
Rick bought the company, and just fast forwarding the present, in the last year, like many companies in the space, Rick took in tens of millions of dollars in investment to really scale his operation. So we're thrilled to have Rick here today, and he competes directly with Shopify and has known Shopify for many, many years. And so we thought, who could we bring in who would be better than this? We couldn't think of anybody. So Rick, great to have you here today.
Awesome, Andy. Brian, thanks so much for having me here today.
I'll say, okay, so first question, and we want these questions to come flooding through because this is really about the audience asking questions. But Brian and I had a few questions we want to kick it off with. Here's the big one. We hear this all the time. Shopify is a great way to get started. Shopify is a great way to do a proof of concept. You can get up and running easily with this. Rick, what's wrong with that argument?
Well, a lot. But I think the most basic thing is, especially in the world of B2B, B2B is not proving a concept. If I'm selling HVAC parts, right, or if I'm selling for Shimano, if I'm selling bicycle brake parts and I've already got a distribution network, I'm not trying to prove anything. The proof of concept is I've had a long-standing business that's successful. What I'm trying to do is solve technological hurdles. I'm trying to integrate systems. I'm trying to have NetSuite talk to my warehouse management system, talk to potentially buy online, pick up and store to Shimano's dealers. I have a whole slew of complex plumbing issues to have behind the scenes that, look, Shopify, if I was starting a new t-shirt business today to try to use Instagram ads to sell snarky t-shirts, I personally would start on Shopify. However, that is the wrong place for an established business that has a complex set of operational instructions to start, because you can't get there. It's like a back road in Maine. You can't get there from here.
Rick, you're only thinking about the technology, the functionality. Listen, I mean, there are $300 billion in transactions running through Shopify. There's 2 million almost merchants on it. If you think about B2B, right? And Andy and I spend our world talking to B2B companies. It's not just about the functionality or technology. It's about aligning the organization. And one of the ways you can align the organization is with an easy proof of concept. I don't buy it, Rick. Why can't we use Shopify for an easy proof of concept? You said it yourself.
Okay, so let's say Shimano, just since you highlighted them in there, I know what they sell, so it's easy for me to talk about them. So if they're listening, I'm not trying to pick on you, but let's say they've got a new product line under a new brand. So they got Shimano 2, and they're going to launch a new Kevlar-based bike brake, and they just want to get a site up and running simply. So the shopping experience, that's absolutely correct. That's super simple, although it's not that hard on the other platforms either. But yeah, you could have a site up in, even for a big company that's hiring an agency, you could have a site up and call it 1 man month or 1 person month, and you're up. Orders start coming in. Now what? Right? What are they going to do with these orders? How are they going to get into their ERP? What are they going to do to manage inventory? How are they going to alert those customers if it's at a local retail store? What the heck are they going to do with those orders? All the proof of concept is going to prove is that someone may want to buy from this brand. And alternatively, you can achieve that same simple proof of concept with virtually every other platform. You could do that with Miva. You could do it with BigCommerce. You could do it with WooCommerce. Sure, Magento and Demandware may be a heavier lift. But if they're really contemplating Shopify for a simple POC, they're not contemplating Demandware and Magento. What's happened, the big issue in the market right now, and Shopify, I have no diss to Toby and them as a company, but the ground they've staked is the easy button. And ask any person on this call or any person in what I call real business ain't easy.
All right, good answer. It's interesting you mentioned that because ultimately the Shopify system is easy to use. And I think you said earlier that, the integration, right? You're talking about integration. Are you saying you can't integrate Shopify into your ERP? I call foul on that.
At all. You can absolutely do it. But for example, Shopify's API is highly limited. That's one of their biggest like hiccups that you'll hear about. Now, are they capable of fixing that if they wanted to invest in it? Sure. But if you're going to use your ERP for inventory lookups, and let's say you have also a retail network. So your ERP, your NetSuite knows where all your stuff is, and your Shopify store is going to hit NetSuite and display real-time inventory. Achieving that in a functional way on Shopify is essentially impossible.
Well, and we're getting comments in here from the audience. Mark McGowan, he actually agrees with you, Rick. He said the obvious answer is no, it can't be used for B2B. It's the last thing on Shopify's roadmap, as evidenced by their most recent investor presentation. I don't know, Rick, if you paid him off to join our webinar today, but
I don't even know Mark, but I think this was just asked on their recent earnings call. Someone asked them, how do they decide what goes in the core product and what's an app, right? And they paid out $400 million in the last 12 months to their app developers. So their app ecosystem is thriving. But this goes back to my core thesis here. When it comes to a B2B business that has truly complex, operationally critical needs, you're not going to let 12 different apps that have never talked to each other that are ran by 2-person shops be the critical linchpin of your business.
I don't know if I buy it, Rick. I don't know.
You don't have to. I only care what the audience buys.
Well, let's talk about this for a second. We're getting comments and we'll bring some of those in here. But, I think it's fairly inarguable that Shopify Plus brags on their own website that they have 250 plus partners.
Yep.
That's pretty compelling, is it not?
No, look, Shopify Plus. Well, look, there was a tweet went viral last night or last week. I can't think of the guy's name. When Shopify, the whole stock market was in a wildfire last week. It wasn't just Shopify, but a tweet went viral, and the guy who's a big Shopify investor and sold his consumer products company to, I think, Procter and Gamble for $100 million, commented that Shopify Plus has, even though it's successful financially and has all these partners, it's kind of a failure to launch, right? What does it have? 3 extra apps or 4 extra apps that you can get, and you get an SLA and you get a person to call. It's still their DNA runs through Shopify from Toby to their 6,000th employee, which is they want everything to be simple. They want, if something's in the core product, they want 90% of their customers to use it, which is something he said multiple times. And to punt to the apps, what that does is, sure, it helps sell the easy thing. But when your volume pricing is screwing up your inventory at your retail shop in Poughkeepsie, who the frick are you going to call?
Okay. So what do you make? So Chelsea Shardelli, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Chelsea. She asks, what do you make of Shopify's recent acquisition of Handshake and ePortal? Is that not a sign they're investing in this B2B channel? Come on, Rick.
It is actually. And it's Handshake was a few years ago. It was pre-pandemic, which feels like a lifetime ago. But and I was very familiar with Handshake. I knew their whole team. I've seen their product up close and personal. And Handshake was an interesting acquisition. I think my personal hypothesis there, based on what happened to that staff and what happened to that product, is they took the former CEO of Handshake and made him product director for Shopify Plus. So they bought an e-commerce expert. The price they paid for Handshake compared to the valuation of Shopify was like pocket change for you and I. And they basically relegated the Handshake features to an app. And Handshake was an awesome buying tool if you sold on an iPad, if you were in the field, and they mostly sold to like beverage distributors. So you're out and I'm at Coca-Cola, and I'm out in the field at a restaurant or a bar, and I've got my iPad and I'm ordering beer or Coke. And it was a great little tool. And the fact that they've plumbed that into Shopify is intriguing, and it does signal that they're doing some investment. But they have yet to, and they're a big company, they can afford to do whatever they want. But, and this is the big but, no one is great at everything. Nobody on earth is great at everything. And that's where I also go back to Mark's comment. I think Shopify has made the decision that it's not worth the distraction to be great at this.
Okay. We got a comment here from Mark McGowan, another one, a big focus for BigCommerce. Interesting is B2B. The big announcement last year was their launch of their B2B edition, which is powered by Bundle B2B. Thanks for that comment, Mark. So Rick, let's get down to brass tacks though. I mean, you talk about use cases, you talk about where it's not, not fitting. I mean, when we talk about functionality, I mean, Shopify has they have all the functionality you need for delivering an experience, a world-class experience. I mean, these functionalities are commoditized. Why wouldn't a B2B company be able to use the functionality that exists there, even with apps or without apps?
I actually disagree with your thesis a hair. You after this call, go spin up a Shopify site, upload 1 million SKUs, and set up volume pricing, and tell me how that works for you. And now, okay. What I will say is this: what Shopify has nailed, and what they're so good at, and frankly, what I think all of us in the rest of the space should be using as the North Star, is they've nailed the checkout flow. Right. So if you can get everything into your cart, if you can manage your inventory, manage your pricing, know where the stuff is, know where the warehouses are, and get it into the checkout funnel, their checkout flow is great. There's lots of other limitations to it, and you can't customize that much, but at least they've really optimized for conversion. But you have auto parts, and you're selling a 2017 and a half tonneau cover on Shopify. I'll see you next year when you get this checkout done.
Well, yeah. All right, Rick.
Well, Brian, let's talk about that one real quick.
Yeah, all right, go ahead.
You brought that up. I agree that Shopify has really nailed the checkout, and they've got something called Shopify Payments, which settles in 133 different currencies. Right? How does a Miva compete with that?
Well, look, that's a great question, and I will tell you that's hard. Like that is a real challenge for me, and that is something I've been having meetings on routinely. There is one secret weapon on this. It's all on the back of Stripe. Stripe has a program that lets me do the same thing. So now, just because Stripe sort of commoditized shop pay sort of doesn't make my life. It makes my life a little bit easier. It just doesn't make it that much easier.
And also, go ahead, Brian.
I was going to ask one question, Rick. Getting back to the description you gave a moment ago. With where Shopify doesn't work, right? I'll concede that if you have thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of SKUs and variants and all the rest, fine. But that's not every use case in B2B. I mean, let's think about a manufacturer who may have 200 products in their catalog, and maybe they have standardized pricing, and it's not the complexity of some of the distributors out there.
That's absolutely. Look, that's. I'll give you that one, Brian, for sure, because. The very concept of B2B, right? You have $27 trillion in B2B sales in North America. You have about 2.1 of it online, right? So what, 8-9% of sales online now. Some people are just selling one thing or 20 things, and they don't have variants, and they just have, you sign up to be a reseller and everyone gets the same price. In those worlds, Shopify, for that matter, WooCommerce would be fine. Your needs become very minimal. What happens, what I think is the differentiator between, look, Shopify has really nailed what I'll call the Intuit space, right? They are the QuickBooks of e-commerce. And shoot, both of those are very valuable companies. I'm certainly, from a valuation standpoint, envious. But just like QuickBooks can't be the accounting system for Honda, Shopify can't be the e-commerce platform for everybody.
Okay, all right. Well, keep the questions coming in, folks. We got a bunch of good ones here. Andy, what's up next?
Yes, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the features of Shopify. They have something called Shopify Scripts, which is kind of interesting, where they can really do bulk pricing. But it kind of begs the question, and you mentioned this earlier about uploading a million SKUs and doing pricing for them. You can do bulk pricing, but can you do individualized pricing?
So I'm not an expert on the limitations of Shopify Script. I actually, when that came out, I was really fascinated. Shopify, the company that is notorious for making things point and click easy, when it came to their pricing engine, punted and just gave you a developer's tool. So, and I certainly wasn't in the boardroom, so to speak, at Shopify to make that decision. And this is almost exactly inverted to how Miva has handled this particular problem. So when it comes to developing the look and feel, when it comes to spinning up a new product display page, for example, Miva is a more developer-centric tool, because our assumption is that that complex businesses are used to having web developers and et cetera build out their IT infrastructure. The CEO of Shimano is no more going to go program a Squarespace site than they are a Shopify site. And so, but when it comes to pricing, knowing full well that you shouldn't have to have a web developer work on pricing. Right? Who's going to do pricing? Well, accounting might do pricing, sales might do pricing, marketing might do pricing, director of e-commerce might do pricing. That should not require a scripting language.
Got another question in here, Andy, if I may. Mark asked, if you want to do it e-commerce at scale, especially B2B, do you have to go headless? Rick.
Gosh, headless is such an interesting buzz. You have to have. I would meet Mark. I think he's saying you do have to go headless, but I would meet Mark in the middle on that if we were having a drink at a bar. I would say you have to have an API-rich platform that lets you control virtually everything. Headless itself, having a separate content management system for creating the content pages, I don't think that's important for B2B. Having something that lets you customize the flows at an API level, absolutely. You need to be able to do custom fields. You need to be able to have an unthrottled API. I think what Mark's getting to here, and I totally agree with, no two businesses, I'm being a little hyperbolic, but no two businesses are exactly the same. Businesses are a little snowflakey, right? The nuances of running Miva are different than the nuances of running master B2B, right? And we could commiserate about some similarities, how hard it is to hire right now, inflation, but the day-to-day of what bothers you and Andy is different than the day-to-day what bothers me. And I think that's where the complex platforms come in. Mark's business is going to be different than Chelsea's business. And that's why you need these platforms that can flex around their business.
We have another question that came in from Tyler Terlecki. Hopefully, Tyler, I'm saying your name right. Well said. How do you feel?
I'm glad you're handling the names today, Brian.
Yeah, really. We got some challenging ones. My name's easy, Beck. How do you feel Shopify scales for a company that has an acquisition strategy with M&A activities? That's an interesting one.
Well, that is a really interesting question. I think on the consumer side, if you're buying direct to consumer style brands, we've seen a bunch of this activity this past 12, 18 months where these private equity firms are funding these Shopify aggregators that are buying up all these Shopify companies. I think, if you're doing an M&A strategy, having a platform you can put them all onto, that is a nice strategy. And I think it's a reasonably wise one. I think in practice, what we've seen is it ends up being a little hard to execute on, because going back to my thing about all businesses being unique, you're not going to be able to shove every business into the same platform. However, if your thesis is I'm going to go buy 100 direct to consumer packaged good Shopify stores, then having a Shopify background helps.
Okay. Andy, what else we got?
Yeah, so you brought this up earlier about the learning scripting languages. And I know from having done evaluations of Miva, this is a critique that people have, and I want to give you a chance to address this. I have to learn a scripting language called Miva script, right? In order to...
No, actually, that's a misnomer. So
you're going to bust that myth, huh?
I'll bust that myth, but I won't waste most people's time on this. If you come to work for me as a developer in my core development team, you have to learn Miva script. If you want to be a third-party developer writing, say, payment modules for Miva, you got to learn Miva script. Beyond that, no one has to learn Miva script. What our customers use is we have a template language that is ostensibly like, what is Shopify's one called Liquid, and BigCommerce is called Stencil. We have our own version of that. And I forget what Magento uses, one of those PHP ones. All of these languages, all of these platforms that have a content management system, which is all good platforms, have some sort of tool for putting in a variable. So, if I'm John Deere tractors and I need to create a new field for a sub SKU for international parts, you aren't going to go find a platform that's custom built the John Deere sub SKU field. You need a platform that can create a variable, and those are the kind of things you do in our scripting language. But those are the things you do on Shopify, BigCommerce, et cetera.
Andy, we got a follow-on question to the prior point here, Rick. It says, how about multi-site for an umbrella of brands? I think going back to the M&A strategy thing for a second.
That is something Shopify Plus does really well. Okay. And I will just full disclosure, that is something we do okay. It's on our roadmap for a full revision next year. We handle it better than most. I think Shopify, that's probably one of Shopify Plus's best strengths. If you can find brands that fit within the same operational architecture, using Shopify Plus for the multi-brand thing is pretty solid.
Okay, we got about 5 minutes left, guys. So Andy, what else we got?
Yeah, I was curious about Shopify has this thing called Shopify Capital. I'm curious if you've been tempted to do this as well, where they loan, money to their customers. This is something that scale gives you the ability to do. Ever tempted to do that? And do you think that Shopify's got an interesting angle on this?
Am I tempted to do it? Absolutely. And so I'm certainly not, we don't have any plans to launch it anytime soon, but I'm not saying we'll never launch that. I agree with you. One of the things, going back to my long history in e-commerce, what was weird is from 1999 through, when did Demandware get bought by Salesforce? 2011 or whatever. For the first 12 years of core e-commerce, there really, other than GSI going to eBay, there was really no billion-dollar e-commerce deals. And then Hybris gets bought and Demandware gets bought. And even then, the biggest of the big were $2 billion, $3 billion acquisitions, right? And there was almost this sense in the market that that there was a cap on how much scale an e-commerce platform could be, and then Shopify redefined the game. What's fascinating to me is 70% of Shopify's revenue now seems to come from their fintech products, right? So Shopify Capital, Shopify Payments, all their banking stuff. So it's attractive to us, and I think we may eventually get there. But you're right; they're going to get a lot more bang for their mental and physical investment because of their scale.
Yeah, it's hard to believe they claim that they do loans up to $2 million.
What's wild to me there, though, and I've seen this with Shopify's product. You mentioned we just recently did an investment during that process, blah, blah, blah. We go through a whole diligence phase. We hired a PE diligence firm to work with us on all of our major competing platforms, do deep demos, the kind of stuff you don't see as a non-user. And we got to see it from a user perspective. And Shopify is running the risk of getting cluttered, right? Their focus has been taken. When 70% of your revenue comes from this thing, then suddenly 70% of your experience is going to be driven by this thing. That's just the nature of how you run a business. And I personally believe they are slipping away from their easy button as they chase this other revenue. I'm not even saying I would do it differently if I was in their shoes. I'm just saying they're kind of experiencing, or they are experiencing, a natural dilemma of scaled businesses.
So Rick, in a nutshell, then you're saying that there are some use cases where Shopify can work for B2B potentially, but there's many use cases in B2B where it doesn't. What do you think the 2 or 3 biggest areas where Shopify doesn't hit the mark for B2B? I mean, you highlighted a few. Could you just kind of sum it? We have just a couple minutes left. Maybe you could sum it up for us, and what are the key things it doesn't address in your opinion?
Sure. So, I mean, let's just start with kind of their most well-known Achilles heel is their API limits, right? So if your system is going to be part of a hub of interconnected systems, and you need to be able to hammer that API, as of today, Shopify does not allow you to buy your way around that limitation. 2, pricing catalogs, right? So you should have a robust pricing engine, because one of the downsides to using a scripting language for pricing, the Shopify scripting, is, you know what you can do with the scripting language? You can write poor scripts. Poor scripts may not scale to performance, right? The one thing a B2B focused e-commerce platform, one of the things they should do is pricing engines and pricing books are core to good e-commerce for B2B. And if you're not working on something that can scale with shoppers, users, et cetera, you're going to run into some issues, right? And then finally, I think the third real critical heel to the Shopify platform is B2B tends to be mission critical, right? If I'm snarkytshirts.com and I have an outage, okay, that may be painful, right? But I promise you, Shimano probably doesn't feel the same way about their outages. And if their outage is caused because there's a third-party app that's ran by a person overseas that turns out to be the thing that is the linchpin to their whole Rube Goldberg contraption, the director of e-commerce who made that decision is probably going to have a frustrating conversation with the CEO of that company.
All right. Well, thank you, Rick. That's great stuff. We got just about 1 minute left. Andy, any final takeaways for the audience today before we wrap up?
I think my personal opinion on Shopify is that I'd like to see more of a focus on B2B. I'd like to see them open up the kimono a little bit. I know historically they've been considered industry analysts, consultants, et cetera, to be adversarial to them. But the thing in B2B is it's reputational. Yep. And I can't tell you how many times I've been asked this question. I'm sure you have too, Brian. What do you think of Shopify? And when Shopify doesn't really reach out to people and brief them, persuade them that they're a viable competitor. That's why we wanted to do this. In fact, it would be great to have somebody from Shopify, I know, like Rick and Shopify, to go back and forth. But
let's get them on. Come on, Shopify, if you're listening, come on.
That's right. Come on in. And so we're basically, going from what people have told us, what we've read. A lot of this stuff is on their website. In fact, it's funny, Rick, you mentioned about the third-party app restriction. They have a whole page on their website under the wholesale channel where they talk about all the apps that they don't work with. And so, if I'm a B2B company, I'm a little concerned about that.
Yeah, great. So we're just up on time. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Thanks for your awesome questions. Rick, you did pretty well on the hot seat there, man. Good work. All right.
And we'll have a fireproof suit.
That's right. So everyone take a look at our website, Master B2B, to see upcoming Mythbusters sessions, executive roundtables, and on webinars. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you next time.